So here's what happened this week. The State Department fired all 30 full-time staff at the Global Engagement Center, eliminated all 50 full-time staff positions, and delivered a notice to Congress ending the entire capacity's existence and $65 million in funding, made possible by Secretary Rubio and Undersecretary Beatty. And the way it was structured is as a reduction in force, which is called a RIF. In a company, when you're concerned that if you fire someone, they'll do some BS labor law thing, oftentimes things are structured as a layoff. That way, you can't be slowed down by the bureaucratic maneuverings of lawyers. And that's what they did here. This is a huge thing. If you guys remember, there was a continuing resolution for the U.S. government budget in November 2024, right after the presidential election. And there was a big dogfight where they tried to reauthorize this censorship center out of the Global Engagement Center. And it became such a scandal, and Elon became so motivated over it, that they threatened to primary any Republican who voted for that continuing resolution, in large part because it maintained the reauthorization of the Global Engagement Center, which was the censorship center of the State Department. That was so inflammatory on its face that we literally killed the entire U.S. budget over it. And then, because without reauthorization, it died by sunset, the Biden administration, as one of their last acts, they said, okay, can't call it the Global Engagement Center anymore. We're going to keep all the staff, though, and keep the function, and call it RFEMI, Foreign Influence, Malign Influence, tucked under the public relations, public diplomacy side of state, which is called R, hence RFEMI. And so it fell to the Undersecretary of Public Relations, Public Diplomacy to secure the buy-in of the Trump administration, of Secretary Rubio, to pursue this insane censorship cell's remnant, an entire spider web of censorship institutions here and around the world. There were lawsuits launched against this network because the Global Engagement Center was funding places like the Global Disinformation Index, which was creating advertiser blacklists of what kind of U.S. news would not be allowed to get advertising revenue. So the State Department was effectively picking winners and losers in the private news industry. For example, one Global Engagement Center funded group, the London-based Global Disinformation Index, compiled blacklists of media outlets to feed to advertisers, essentially a form of financial warfare against disfavored outlets. The top 10 outlets on its disinformation list were all on the right. They love NPR, they love AP, New York Times, Washington Post, BuzzFeed, but the ones to kill the advertiser revenue: New York Post, Reason, Real Clear Politics, Daily Wire, The Blaze, OAN, AmCon, Federalist, Newsmax. This is the State Department picking winners and losers in the economics of the news industry. A little bit more on the history of this place because I think it's important. It's truly an incredible story in terms of mission creep. I talk about this a lot, the Office of War Information. The marriage of the military and the media goes back to the Office of War Information in 1942, which crystallized the relationship between War Department propaganda and mainstream media distribution. The Office of War Information, which built the War Department's distribution network with mainstream media, and you can see why they did this. We were fighting World War II, the war to end all wars, and media is a tool of soft power projections. And so media gets wrapped up into the war effort. Problem is, it never got unwrapped after the war. It only deepened as we fought the Cold War. So the Office of War Information built this distribution network, and then that turned into, effectively, begot the U.S. Information Agency, which was not dissolved until 1999, which only existed for 45 years, just like the Global Engagement Center only lasted for 14 years. It's not like the War Department, which is now our Defense Department / Pentagon, which existed since moment one. The War Department, the State Department, and the Treasury Department were the three departments that were created on day one of this country. They've been around since 1789. But the U.S. Information Agency was a formal information control mechanism in the U.S. government devoted to propaganda, which operated from 1953 to 1999. Previously existing U.S. information posts operating out of U.S. embassies, so it was always a State Department function. Embassies are the State Department. Worldwide, since World War II, became field operations offices of the U.S. Information Agency. In 1999, prior to the reorganization of the intelligence agencies by President George W. Bush, President Clinton assigned the U.S. Information Agency's cultural exchange and non-broadcasting intelligence functions to the newly created Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs at the U.S. State Department. This is Darren Beatty's role. They did away with the U.S. Information Agency, and it turned into a new role in 1999 called the State Department Public Diplomacy Bureau, which later created GEC, the Global Engagement Center. So understand the State Department Public Diplomacy Bureau is effectively the State Department's continuation of the U.S. Information Agency. So you have this lineage from Cold War propaganda to GWAT era propaganda to Trump era propaganda. So basically control over the information space to stop communism, to stop terrorism, and then to stop Trumpism. That's the evolution of the State Department office. So the Global Engagement Center, this censorship web, was set up by Rick Stengal. This dude was the managing editor of Time magazine. Time magazine was a major branch of Operation Mockingbird, the CIA intermediated media web. And he talked about how his job was to export the First Amendment by bringing free speech to all these authoritarian countries. Again, you guys know the reason why. That's to support CIA-backed groups who have limited information distribution, often because of government control over media. Ironically, it would be Stengal who would set up government control over media out of the State Department. So he was the longest-serving Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs since the job was created in 1999. And then at the State Department, Stengal launched and led the Global Engagement Center, the U.S.'s only standalone anti-disinformation entity. It was set up to stop ISIS and al-Qaeda at a time when the FBI was creating ISIS plots at home, like the Garland, Texas attack that we've talked about many times, which the FBI orchestrated from top to bottom, including paying an FBI informant over $100,000 to become the shooter's best friend, text him to tear up Texas, allow the attack to happen, even though they were following him in a car the whole way, and then claim that there's a massive homegrown ISIS threat, so the State Department needs to have a censorship mechanism to stop ISIS recruiting on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. And then when Trump won, they said, actually, it's not just about stopping terrorism, it's about stopping threats to democracy, like anyone who supports our duly elected U.S. President, Donald Trump, and his international allies, populist governments across the world. Stengal is now on the board of advisors of NewsGuard, probably the most powerful gargoyle, for-profit censorship company in the private sector, which worked with the Biden administration closely, has the former head of NATO on its board of advisors, has Rick Stengal on its board of advisors, has the former DHS Secretary Tom Ridge on its board of advisors, etc., etc. Here's from the Global Engagement Center's internal documents, which I found. Examples of Global Engagement Center targeted training, research, and outreach, 2019 to 2021. Developed a whole-of-society approach through training and networking of civil society organizations, CIA cutouts, State Department cutouts. In Latin America, under the Global Engagement Center's Media Literacy Accelerator Network. Again, media literacy means censorship. It means forced to read the approved media sources. And if you read the wrong media sources, you are media illiterate. Whole of society approach. The State Department partnering with the private sector, partnering with the NGOs, partnering with the universities, partnering with the trade associations, partnering with the media organizations. How's this for mission creep here at the bottom? Expansion of GEC's mission and mandate. The 2019 McCain NDAA, the ghost of John McCain. The John McCain National Defense Authorization for fiscal year 2019 updated and expanded the GEC's mission and mandate. In addition to the GEC's original purpose to lead, synchronize, and coordinate, the center would now also direct and integrate federal government efforts to counter disinformation, aimed at much more than undermining U.S. national security interests as the original legislation directed. Oh, it's not just about national security anymore. It's everything. And then it ballooned its staff, its contractors, the works.